Greetings, my heroic hunters. Today, ComixFM drags you claw first into the most blood-drenched crossover ever etched in ink. Predator vs. Spider-Man, written by the ruthless Benjamin Percy and splattered to life by Marcelo Ferreira. Enter the Skinner, a butcher of legends. He doesn't hunt for honor, he slaughters for thrill. He peels the raw skin from his victims, stretching it over his own body like a walking graveyard. Spider-Man swings in only to find himself the target of a beast who sees him as nothing but meat. Blades flash, webs snap, flesh tears, and the city screams. Smash that subscribe button, and let's dive in. Chapter 1. Dog Day Afternoon. In a sweltering New York summer, the city simmered under brutal sunlight. Streets baked, garbage sizzled on corners, and subway vents spewed stale heat. People wilted in their clothes while tensions and crime surged. Robberies, assaults, and murders spiked as the heat grew cruel. But amid the chaos, a new murder stood out, different, methodical, and unnervingly artistic. A pair of investigators arrived at a grim crime scene in an abandoned building long taken over by squatters. One, Detective Lapel, calmly crunched ice while surveying the horror, a skinned human corpse hanging grotesquely with surgical precision. She noted it wasn't the usual gunshot or stabbing. This killing was slow, deliberate, and full of intent. The killer had taken their time, removing parts, jaws, ribs, even fingers, as though collecting trophies. The crime scene investigator in uniform theorized about drugs or revenge, but LaPearl dismissed it. Logic didn't apply to someone who skinned people. She called it the work of a skinner, a trophy hunter. As she questioned why the investigator had already spoken to neighbors, the real investigator finally arrived, revealing the man she was talking to as someone else. Alarmed, LaPearl realized someone had impersonated a detective to get ahead of them. Meanwhile, Spider-Man ditched the crime scene uniform and swung through the golden skyline. He contacted Jameson, reporting, "Mr. Jameson, it's Peter. I've got something." At the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson yelled at Peter Parker over the phone, furious that Peter's last tip was about a puppy parade. He demanded sensational bad news to drive ad revenue and told Peter he was close to being fired. As Spider-Man swung across the city, he offered Jameson a new lead, mass murder, and was asked if he had photos. Spider-Man promised he'd be at the scene in 5 minutes, noting that traffic was light the way he traveled. Just then, Spider-Man spotted a violent robbery in progress. Armed criminals wearing bug-eyed masks opened fire from a building, escaping with sacks of cash into a van. Spidey, witnessing the shootout, changed plans and said it'd be more like 20 minutes now. Something had come up. As the masked robbers sped off in a van, Spider-Man gave chase. He tried to cut them off a block ahead, but an open fire hydrant had turned a road into a water park for kids. As the van barreled toward the children playing, Spider-Man acted fast. He fired webs to pull the kids and a dog out of harm's way just in time, apologizing for interrupting their playdate. The van sped away into a nearby alley. The robbers returned to their hideout and parked inside a dimly lit warehouse. One thug barked orders to close the door, split the cash quickly, and avoid contact for 2 weeks. But as he looked around, he found his crew already dead, skinned and mutilated. Panicking, he grabbed a gun and demanded to know who was there, assuming someone wanted a cut of their score. He said, "Let's work something out," as primal eyes glowed behind him. As he turned, claws tore his face open in a brutal strike, peeling back the flesh with a sickening skelch. The thug, now fully skinned and panicked, let out a scream as a blade suddenly pierced through his chest with a brutal snick, silencing him. His body collapsed to the floor in a pool of blood. A green-armored cloaked figure reached out, holding the man's torn flesh. It was a predator. He put on the torn face as a mask. Its mandibles pierced through the skin. He wore the robber's face like a trophy. Elsewhere, Spider-Man swung away from the kids he had just saved, joking about avoiding delivery bikes, grumpy taxi drivers, and burritos. He returned to the alley hideout and found the garage door open. Landing inside, he gasped, seeing the flayed remains of the robbers suspended in chains. Removing his mask and calling Jameson, He said what he'd seen earlier wasn't an isolated incident. "We're dealing with a serial killer." As the heat wave raged, people struggled to stay cool. Every air conditioning unit ran on max, fans blew at full speed, and the power grid strained. At the Daily Bugle, editors reviewed Peter's article. One wanted more panic, something fear-inducing. But Peter argued the piece should keep people vigilant, not scared. Just then, the lights shut off. Jameson cursed, it was a power outage, and yelled that he had breaking news. A subway train continued underground. Inside, Mary Jane Watson stood among tired commuters, reading A Streetcar Named Desire and applying lip gloss. Suddenly, the train went dark with a click. The surrounding passengers froze. Mary Jane, now illuminated by the faint light of her phone, looked around in frustration and said, "Seriously?" As the subway sat motionless in the dark, passengers began to panic. Someone shouted, others cursed, and fear spread quickly. One woman, trembling, clutched her head and muttered, "No," repeatedly. Mary Jane introduced herself and gently asked if the woman was okay. The woman explained she was claustrophobic, overwhelmed by the heat and darkness. MJ, holding up her phone like a window, told her to focus on the open space outside. It helped, and the woman thanked her. MJ encouraged her to focus outward, not inward. The woman tried, and they both looked out the window. Then MJ noticed movement and said she saw somebody out there. The woman suggested it might be a transit worker fixing the tracks. But suddenly, the terrifying predator leapt at them from the darkness, its grotesque flesh-covered mask inches from the glass. The woman let out a piercing scream, startling everyone. Meanwhile, at the Daily Bugle, staff scrambled to adapt to the blackout. One editor demanded the story be uploaded to social media, but the power and cell towers were out. Con Ed predicted days before full restoration. Peter suggested they fire up the backup generator. With the digital network down, he advised them to go analog, printing physical newspapers instead. As the printing press roared to life, copies of the Bugle rolled out. The headline warned of a serial killer. Over the next hours, paperboys shouted in the streets. New Yorkers sought ways to stay cool. Fountains, parks, dinners. They unknowingly mingled in danger. The Bugle's extra editions hit hands across the city. Jonah Jameson himself promoted the paper. Warning, the streets are going to be dark tonight. There's a serial killer on the loose. He hiked the price to $10 and screamed about new killer, whom they named the Skinner. Just then, the Pearl snatched the paper from him and snapped, "Give me that." She went through the newspaper and found out that the photo credits were given to Peter Parker. Jameson shouted at her, demanding $20 for the paper and snapping that the Bugle wasn't a library, but she slammed him against the wall. She warned him that a new law forbade publishing crime scene photos without permission from victims or police. Jameson dismissed her, claiming protection under the Fourth Estate. She pulled out her badge, threatening arrest unless he cooperated. She wanted to bring Parker in for questioning. As she asked where he was, Peter had already swung away as Spider-Man. Spidey webbed through the city, concerned for MJ. He climbed up her apartment fire escape and entered through the window. He softly called for her, saying he had a long night ahead but wanted to check on her audition. No one answered. Back in the subway, MJ's book fell to the floor, stained in blood, and a hand lay limp nearby. A scream echoed through the dark. Elsewhere, an old man handed out Daily Bugle issues warning of a predator. As he walked away, two men stalked him. One wondered how much cash he had. They cornered him and pulled a gun, demanding he empty his pockets. Before they could rob him, someone attacked. One thug screamed as a massive arrow pierced his hand. A shadowy figure emerged and warned them not to be outside at night. Another thug tried to shoot, but got another arrow through his skull. The figure pulled out the arrow from the dead thug's head and told the paperman, "You aren't strong enough. You shouldn't be out alone, in the dark." It was Craven, holding a bloodied arrow and his massive crossbow. He told the old man, "But before you run away and hide, what were you saying?" about this predator. Chapter 2. Blood Hunt. 8.5 million people in New York City were without power during the hottest night of the year. A violent surge took down the grid. Transformers exploded, prompting utility workers to scramble across the city for emergency repairs. But they were unaware of the true darkness they faced. One technician descended into the tunnels to fix a fault. As he welded, he heard screams. Following the noise, he called out and reached a subway platform where he assumed people were trapped. He reassured them and approached cautiously. As he pulled open the car door, a pool of blood slithered out. He heard someone cry for help and rushed forward, only to find mutilated bodies hanging from the ceiling, their flesh skinned, their muscles and bones exposed. Horrified, he whispered, "Good God in heaven!" A voice called out again. He turned and saw a lady in bad shape, staggering towards him and asking for help. But as she came close, he saw that it was just a skin, worn by the creature from hell. The creature could mimic human voices and screams. The predator pulled back the dead skin and screamed in power. The technician screamed too, in horror. As he was decapitated, Mary Jane and the other woman watched from the shadows. MJ urged the woman to move while the monster was distracted. They bolted. The woman said she didn't want to die. MJ firmly told her she wouldn't let that happen. Peter returned to his apartment. He heard knocking and assumed it was MJ, joking about her forgetting her key. As he opened the door in his Spider-Man suit, he was stunned to find Detective LaPerle instead. Peter slammed the door. LaPerle shouted from outside, telling that she was from the police. She banged on his door, furious that Peter had taken photos of her crime scene. She accused him of acting suspiciously, and even suggested he might be the killer. Peter denied it, arguing that no killer would publish an article about their own crime. LaPerle wasn't satisfied. She reminded him that some killers loved attention and began counting down while pulling a gun. Peter tried to explain there was a second crime scene and admitted he hadn't reported it or included it in his article, fearing the killer might return. LaPerle demanded to know why he thought that. Peter answered that the killer had left behind a pile of cash, implying a return was likely. LaPerle shouted at him to get on the floor, gun raised, but Peter leapt out the window and told her to check the underground garage near Morton and Washington. As Peter swung through the night, he reflected. A killer was loose. A cop was after him. MJ was missing, the city was in a blackout, and temperatures were extreme. What he didn't notice was a yacht ship, invisible. There were eyes following his heat signature. Peter's spidey sense flared constantly, but there was no clear target. It just felt like danger was everywhere, above and below. He arrived at the New York Public Library, deciding to trust MJ could take care of herself. He focused on the killer, who was collecting anatomical trophies: skins, fingers, skulls, ears, eyes, and leaving behind a symbol. Without the internet, Peter turned to books to solve the case. At the underground garage, Craven stood before a skinned corpse, addressing the unknown killer. He confessed he had been bored, until now. Speaking to the hanging body, he declared the killer worthy of his attention. Craven admired that the killer didn't care for money, but for flesh, blood, and bone. He interpreted the killer's methods like his own, collecting anatomical parts as trophies. Holding his skull, he speculated the killer had a den to display their gruesome collection. He respected the killer's precision in skinning and imagined the tools they used. Craven concluded this was a trophy hunter worth hunting and noticed bipedal, reptilian footprints, around 8 feet tall. Then he found Spider-Man's webbing and realized Spidey had already been there and left a trap. Detective LaPerle arrived with her gun drawn, ordering Craven to stay still. Craven claimed he had no quarrel with her. She replied that she had one with anyone standing in a room full of skinned bodies and demanded he surrender. He started complying, but suddenly struck her. LaPerle fought back, firing a shot into Craven's shoulder, but he overpowered her, calling her brave but foolish. As she lay stunned, Craven tangled her in Spider-Man's web trap and left her behind, saying she'd get killed on a night like this while he went hunting. As Craven moved across rooftops, he acknowledged that if Spider-Man knew about the killer, then this hunt had become a race. Meanwhile, Peter was deep in research at the library, flipping through pages until he found an image of the symbol that the Skinner predator left at the Grizzly hunting grounds. Meanwhile, in the sewers, MJ and the woman crept through the darkness. The woman panicked, and MJ turned on her flashlight, only to be startled by a wild-eyed homeless man. He shushed them, warning that noise would bring him. When MJ asked who he was, he offered to show them, but insisted they stay absolutely quiet. In the sewers, MJ, the woman, and the homeless man arrived at a horrific sight. Human remains, arranged like grotesque decorations, hung from the ceiling. MJ held up her flashlight, revealing skin banners and bone sculptures made from victims of all ages, genders, and races. The only thing they had in common was that they were all dead. MJ realized this wasn't a hunter's trophy room, it was a display of madness and chaos. And amidst all of it stood a Yacha throne made of human skin and bones, smeared with blood all over. At the Daily Bugle, Peter told Jameson about his findings from the library. Jameson mocked the relevance of old books, but Peter insisted this had been happening for a long time, during wars, plagues, droughts, whenever things got dangerously hot. He showed Jameson a photo from the Battle of the Bulge in 1945, where victims included both US and German troops. The pattern matched the current killings. Peter explained the symbol and the method of mutilation had shown up globally for centuries. Jameson dismissed it as conspiracy, but pigeons suddenly scattered outside by the arrival of the invisible Yacha ship. Peter felt something was wrong. Jameson sarcastically asked if he should worry about Peter being paranoid over birds and old legends. Peter said he had a sense about things. Before the blackout, Peter had uploaded his crime scene photo to the Google Cloud. That image triggered a hidden algorithm, which sent out a signal. Now, a Yacha hunting party of 3 had descended on Earth to punish the one who hunted without honor. Chapter 3. Honor Killing. In the darkness, Jameson questioned what was going on with Peter, but Peter remained quiet. Suddenly, the power came back on, and Jameson cheered, but Peter grew tense and insisted they needed to leave. Jameson was confused, but Peter stressed that the heat wave, blackout, and killings were all connected. He said he had something urgent to show that could be the next headline. Meanwhile, the trio of Yacha hunters stood atop the Daily Bugle building. They leapt off and crashed through the windows. As glass shattered, Jameson demanded answers from Peter, who warned that he wouldn't believe what was coming. Jameson and Peter heard the noise, and Peter slipped away, promising to check it out. As the Yacha spread through the office, Peter quickly suited up as Spider-Man. One of the predators passed near a cubicle with a hang-in-there poster as Peter readied himself in secret. The Yacha hunting party discovered the evidence board Peter had set up. It contained clippings about the murders and a map with a trail of incidents marked Skinner. The Yacha recognized the pattern. This was why they had come. They were hunting one of their own, who had lost all honor, the one the humans called Skinner, who had disgraced their species. One of them picked up a sketch of Skinner's mark just as a webline snatched it from their hand. Spider-Man appeared upside down and sarcastically asked if they'd sit for an interview. One of the predators immediately threw a blade, slashing Spider-Man across the side. He took it as a no and dropped to the floor. The Yacha surrounded him. As the predators attacked with their shurikens, combi sticks, and battle axes, Peter said, "Great, the press is under attack again." 2 power workers were on a rooftop trying to restore electricity to part of the city. One of them said the transformer was running again and they should be able to bring back power. Just as they activated it, an arrow struck the transformer. The transformer blew up, electrocuting and killing both the workers. Nearby, Craven watched the explosion from a rooftop. He was the one who shot the arrow. He declared that the city must remain in the dark, or else the Avengers would intervene. He didn't want interference. He wanted the hunt for himself. Craven reflected on the murders spreading across the city. Victims had been found at a Harlem nursing home and the Bronx Zoo. A tiger was stripped to the bones, and a body was discovered hanging from a tunnel. He compared Skinner's random pattern to that of a grizzly or crocodile, except Skinner had no specific hunting preference, making him more unpredictable. Craven knew New York was full of cameras and eyes. If Skinner had killed across boroughs and hadn't been seen once, then he must be traveling underground. Craven realized Skinner was lurking below, like a hungry spider crawling through the city's basement. Below the streets of NYC, Mary Jane, lighting the way with her phone, tried to comfort the frightened woman. The homeless man explained that sometimes it was safer underground than above. When the girl asked what they should do, Mary Jane looked uncertain. The man urged them to keep quiet as noise traveled fast. As he led them forward, a distant, distorted voice called for help. Mary Jane tried to respond, but the man warned them it was a trick. The man revealed that it was the Skinner, a killer who could throw his voice like a puppet master. Though the voice sounded like a woman, it was the Skinner's deception. When they reached a passage going downward, Mary Jane asked why they weren't heading up. The man said they'd go up only after hiding, because the Skinner was coming. The man led them to a chamber and then pushed them in. It was filled with rats. The man told them to stay down as long as they could stand it. Mary Jane resisted, but they all dropped in. They screamed in horror as the rats swarmed them and covered them. Their heat signature were blocked by the rats. The rats shrieked. The Skinner predator had arrived. He dropped down and stabbed the homeless man through the chest with his blade. As the man succumbed to death, he whispered his final words for MJ and the woman. "Stay down. Stay safe." Meanwhile, Spider-Man confronted the three Yachas. Though they had come for Skinner, they weren't above some sport. One considered Spider-Man an entertaining diversion, until he wasn't. Spidey launched a strong kick at one predator and flipped into action, noting that despite being only three, their weapons made it feel like a dozen. One predator aimed its laser at him. The Spidey sense kicked in, and Spider-Man dodged. Webbing a helmet off one of them, Spider-Man joked about wanting to see the face behind the fishnet stocking bodysuit. The unmasked predator hissed and bared his mandibles. Startled, Spider-Man said, "On second thought, you can have your helmet back." He backed away as the predator unsheathed his gauntlet blade. As two of them charged towards him, he webbed both their faces, then pulled and jumped. Their heads struck with each other, and they were incapacitated. As Spider-Man turned, his Spidey sense alarmed a mean tickle. Meanwhile, Jameson stood outside the Bugle. A massive explosion rocked the building, and a big webbed-up body fell down towards him. La Pearl swiftly tackled Jameson out of the way. As she helped Jameson up, she commented that trouble seemed to follow him and Peter everywhere. Jameson started screaming that his office had been destroyed again, blaming idiots and assassins. La Pearl walked towards the webbed-up body, but suddenly, a predator cut through the webbing and lunged out at them. Chapter 4: May the Best Man Kill. In New York City, rats crawled from a steaming manhole onto deserted streets during the blackout in a severe heat wave. Mary Jane crawled out with the rats. She desperately pulled the frightened woman along, urging her to hurry because something terrifying was approaching. Right then, the Yacha called Skinner approached them. He wore human skin, luring victims by mimicking human cries for help. Unlike other Yacha who hunted for honor, Skinner hunted for fear. He drew his blade and screamed a fearful cry, ready to decapitate MJ and the woman. However, his attention was broken by the blast at Daily Bugle. Skinner, despised even among his own kind, ran toward the Yacha ship he detected nearby from the smell of its plasma burners. Meanwhile, MJ and the woman briefly thought themselves safe, but were ambushed by Craven, who screamed, "Where is the predator?" At the Daily Bugle, Detective LePere and Jonah Jameson were attacked by the predator tangled in Spider-Man's webbing. It punched LePere away. Jameson confronted it, demanding it pick on someone slightly smaller than itself, only to be effortlessly tossed aside by the powerful creature. But right then, the attacking predator was violently impaled from behind by Skinner. Skinner raised the dead Yacha high in the air, reveling in victory. Then he threw the Yacha on the ground, and he stood victorious, the killer of both prey and predator. A massive explosion rocked the building as Spider-Man found himself fending off two vicious predators. Though the Yacha weren't hunting him, Spider-Man's presence was annoying enough to warrant a fight. He darted through the air, webbing up one predator and dodging attacks of another. He joked that his rogues gallery was already full and he didn't need alien invaders adding to the mess. However, a predator shot at Ned at him. As Spider-Man tried to dodge it, a plasma blast hit him, throwing him out of the building. Meanwhile, Skinner climbed onto a rooftop near Yacha's ship. Knowing direct confrontation was suicide, he planned to destroy their ship and trap the hunters in New York's dark maze. So focused on the ship, he didn't sense Kraven stalking him. Kraven lunged and launched a brutal attack from above. Their fight was savage. They stabbed each other. Emerald and crimson blood painted the rooftop. He cut off Skinner's fingers and stabbed him with a spear. As both of them closed in, Kraven rammed his hunting knife through Skinner's jaw and finally decapitated his head, bathed in blood. Blood soaked and triumphant. Kraven let out a primal scream, holding Skinner's head in his hands. Kraven had hunted every predator on Earth and now aimed for the stars. A beeping sound caught his attention. Skinner's gauntlet device began to count down, a self-destruct mechanism capable of destroying half the city. Spider-Man, battered but alive, swung in. He had survived the plasma caster. Now his spidey sense had drawn him to the rooftop. Seeing the device, he asked Kraven if it was what he thought. Kraven confirmed it meant death for all. Spider-Man told him to cut the hand off immediately. Kraven warned they might only have seconds. He severed Skinner's arm, and Spider-Man quickly snatched the device with webbing. The two enemies forced into uneasy cooperation to prevent catastrophe. Spider-Man swung through the night sky with the Predator's self-destruct bomb webbed tightly to his back. He knew it might not be enough, but he wrapped it in webbing to muffle the charge. Mary Jane and the others called out to him, but he didn't hear them, his mind focused on saving the city. MJ reached out, yelling, "Tiger, I need you." Even if he didn't hear her, the thought of her was always with him. He would sacrifice himself for the city, but he'd die 1,000,000 times over for her. Spider-Man swung toward the river. Near the bridge, he hurled the bomb far into the water. A blinding flash followed as the bomb exploded in a massive underwater detonation that shook the bridge and lit up the skyline. Kraven watched the explosion from afar, thinking he had always imagined his blade would be the one to kill Spider-Man. But he called it a worthy death. Suddenly, another Yacha leapt at him. Kraven didn't flinch. Covered in blood, he growled, "There are more of you? Good." The two clashed violently. Kraven roared and engaged the new Predator head-on. They traded vicious blows. Kraven welcomed the fight, demanding they taste each other's blood. As the Predator gripped his throat, Kraven smiled. "If I'm going to die, then let me die like this, at the hands of a great hunter." Later, the Daily Bugle burned. Jameson and Detective Lepar reflected on the chaos. The blackout had left no photos or footage. Jameson worried no one would believe them. Suddenly, they noticed green Predator blood on the ground and movement in an alley. Lepal told Jameson to get behind her. She found a wounded Predator still alive. As she aimed her gun, a group of armed agents surrounded them. A man stepped forward, identifying himself as Dr. Abraham Cornelius. He told them to step away from the specimen and thanked them in advance for their discretion and cooperation. Mary Jane ran to the river, sobbing as she feared Spider-Man hadn't survived. She leaned against the fence crying until a voice called, "Hey, beautiful!" She looked up and saw Spider-Man beaten but alive, asking if she could give him a hand. Meanwhile, the Predator who was about to kill Kraven suddenly spared him. He took Skinner's head and walked towards the ship. Confused, Kraven asked why. The Predator removed its mask, roared in challenge, and Kraven understood. They would fight one-on-one. Kraven smiled and accepted and admired the Predator's honor. But surprisingly, the Yacha marked Kraven's forehead with a blade, the same mark seen across centuries in crime scenes. It was the mark of Skinner. Kraven hadn't just been spared. He was branded as the ultimate killer. a bloodied warrior, a great hunter. As the yacht boarded their ship, he mimicked human voice, saying, "Great hunter, come and get it." Craven ran after the predator and entered the ship as the door closed. As the ship departed, Mary Jane and Peter watched. She said they were safe. Peter, haunted, replied he wished he believed that. She comforted him, saying they rarely got breaks between monsters and should enjoy this one. They kissed passionately under the moonlight. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button for more crossover carnage like this. Keep supporting the comic book industry and its creators. Spread the word. ComixFM brings out the X Factor in comics. Until next time, keep hunting for glory.